This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, The Sixth Sense, Season 1, Episodes 8 and 10.
Well, there it is, out in the open. And that's what she's up against. She's not going to stand a chance at that hearing tomorrow. She might as well go in there and plead temporary insanity, whether it's true or not. Leastways, she'd come out of that with 7, maybe 10 years.
Do you think I'm lying?
Well, somebody has to be. And in this case, it's 2 against 1. You against Damaris and Gil Clark.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast crossing the picket line to pitch its psychic veterinarian dentist TV show. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
We're crossing the picket line?
Yeah, I want to do a show about a psychic veterinarian dentist.
I mean, already, it's probably more interesting than what this show is.
I mean, basically happens in these episodes.
Yeah, but instead of having a professor, I'd rather him be a dentist.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like that better because he doesn't seem like he does much actual like university work.
I mean, he's usually, like most university professors, he's kind of like on sabbatical. He's just like floating between things.
Right. Well, it does seem like he has a lot of downtime. Like there's a one episode, I can't remember which one it was, where someone's like, "Hey, you need to get here." He's like, "I'll be on a plane immediately." I'm like, You didn't even check your like curriculum. What classes do you have to teach this week? I guess he has none to teach.
You have an army of TAs for this, Jordan. Jordan, have you never met a university professor before?
That's true. It's been a while. I forgot what university is like.
I remember bumping into one, and I saw her, and she's like, "Oh, I don't even live in the same city as the university I teach at."
I don't remember it being that extreme, but maybe my memory is bad.
Tenure, you can do whatever you want after that.
You think Dr. Michael Rhodes has tenure?
Oh, I mean, he has a whole lab. He definitely does.
It was a different time in the 70s.
Yeah, it was a very different time. Well, Jordan, before we get into this week's episodes, I did a little looky into some of the creators of The Sixth Sense, just to give us a sense of like who's behind this psychic professor show that you love so much.
This masterpiece. And
honestly, it's credited the creators as the writer and the producer of the TV movie Sweet Sweet Rachel. And the producer was a gentleman named Stanley Shepner. He's primarily a TV producer. I was kind of going through his IMDb. Nothing like, you're gonna know, I think, directly, but you'll recognize a few things. He produced a 2-parter of Bruce Lee's Green Hornet series.
Okay.
And then he did a whole bunch of TV movies, things with like titles like Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker and Death Car on the Freeway.
Both sound fun. Yeah,
so you kind of get a sense. He's just turning out TV movies. That's kind of his thing. But because he produced the original TV movie, he ends up with a creator credit here. And then there's the writer, Anthony Lawrence, who wrote the original TV series and is credited here, or the TV movie and is credited here with the TV series. You might know, he did 3 Elvis films, Roundabout, Paradise Hawaiian Style, and Easy Come, Easy Go.
It's funny, I was actually just having a conversation about Elvis and his movies. I don't think I've seen many of them. I know I've seen the one where he's like he's singing out a window to like a Spanish lady. I remember that one, and I remember the Hawaiian one. But he made so many movies. Has anyone seen all these?
Well, you should watch the Anthony Lawrence trilogy then.
Maybe I should.
But then he also wrote a 1979 Elvis biopic starring Kurt Russell.
Really?
I guess once you worked with Elvis for like 3 movies, you probably have a reasonable sense of the man. So maybe it makes sense to bring him in after he's passed away to write the biopic with Kurt Russell.
I just have no memory of Kurt Russell doing an Elvis biopic.
Yeah, I saw photos. Looks good.
Okay.
And in the same theme, Jordan, he also wrote a 1988 biopic of Liberace.
Mm-hmm. Now that sounds good. It's not the HBO Beyond the Candelabra.
Beyond the Candelabra. Good movie. I enjoyed that one.
Did you?
Yeah.
I never saw it.
Nice time.
It was Michael Douglas and Matt Damon, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But he also created a TV series, one that's actually on our list that we have never gotten to yet, but a series called The Phoenix, about an ancient alien on Earth in modern times. So something to look forward to. We might encounter Anthony Lawrence there again.
We did watch Codename Phoenix. It's not that, right?
It's not that different. It's different than that.
Different Phoenix.
And just for fun, Jordan, he wrote one episode of the Planet of the Apes series.
Now, we both sort of enjoyed most of Planet of the Apes. Do you remember did you find out which episode it was? I don't know if I'd remember.
I do know which episode it was. It was the Deception. Do you recall one where because they're on the run, they're basically fugitives, right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the one where they spend the night at a blind ape's house?
At a blind ape's house? Oh, and the ape doesn't know that they're not apes, right? I was kind of hoping it was the episode where they get stuck in the bowling alley. Remember that?
The bowling alley?
Remember the evil general ape gets stuck down. He has to teamwork to try to get out of this like underground subway bowling alley thing.
It's not a subway. It's what bowling alley?
I think it was just a subway, and then I realized halfway through the sentence that it was a subway, and I switched it to bowling alley subway thing, even though it's clearly a subway. It was just me covering my own memory.
Oh, I see. Good cover. Good cover.
Seamless.
And just some fun trivia for you, Jordan. One of these episodes of The Sixth Sense from Season 1, Episode 4, so we're already past, we're not going to watch it, episode called The House That Cried Murder, was directed by Richard Donner of Superman fame.
Wow, Richard Donner directed one of these, huh?
Yeah. The man who made Goonies, Lethal Weapon, he was there. He was directing one of these Sixth Sense early in his career.
Can I add something to this, if you allow? This first episode we're going to talk about, episode 8, Witch Burning Bright. There's a director named John Badham who directed the episode, and I wasn't familiar with him. And I looked up, and this guy directed a bunch of movies, but here's a few of the ones he directed: War Games, Saturday Night Fever, Short Circuit, and Stakeout. Guy directed all those movies,
wow.
and he did this episode.
Wow, big run there with those movies.
I know, pretty good.
Well, on that note, let's get into it, I guess. Here's the IMDb summary for Season 1, Episode 8, Witch Burning Bright. Judith Eaton believes her daughter Damaris is a witch, like previous Eatons.
Sure. Now, I have to ask you before we start. Who are you more excited for as a guest star? Mike Farrell or Cloris Leachman? Who are you more excited about?
Well, I know you were more excited for the guy from MASH. Cloris Leachman was the one I know best, so I was like, hey, Cloris Leachman, all right.
Well, this is, I mean, it's fun to see both these faces, and apparently this was the real selling point of this show, a la Supertrain having guest stars. But this is Mike Farrell before MASH. This is a couple years before MASH, so he was just out doing, what's that, the TV movie we watched way back when at the beginning of this podcast? Quasar, what was it called?
Quester tapes?
Quester tapes, yeah. Same time period.
Yeah, he's just a working actor right now. No one's like, what a cameo.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And I realized because I was watching this episode, I was like, he has such a like non-part. And then I was like, of course he does. He's not BJ Honeycutt yet.
You haven't been gathering around to watch MASH yet. You've been like, MASH.
Well, I have been watching MASH, but he hasn't shown up for a few. He shows up season 3. It's only season 1 of MASH.
Oh, really? I didn't realize he wasn't in the whole thing.
No, he shows up season 3. Big cast change. Him and Colonel Potter.
Wow. I mean, I always think of him as being a core member of the MASH team.
Trust me, he always is in our hearts.
Save it for your MASH cast.
Anyways, we start this episode. Now, I'm going to say a couple things, and I don't know if you realize this, but Dr. Michael's by himself in his office. He's doing some stuff. We're going to get into it. Did you know this is the end of his assistant? His assistant isn't in the show anymore.
I noticed she wasn't there, but I didn't realize she had been removed from the show at this point.
She's gone. She's only in the first 6 episodes, which we've seen. So I kind of think it's a bummer. I think there's a fun interplay they can have between the two. Now, obviously, she wasn't utilized very well in the first couple episodes, but I think there was potential for that. You know, God forbid they ever actually have her go out on an adventure with him, but there was something to be said about like, you know, researching and learning stuff and going back and forth. I think they could have had some fun there, but she's gone. But in place, Dr. Michael does everything now. And what he does to research cases is he gets a bunch of letters in the mail and he spreads them out in front of him. And then he just hovers his hands over and like psychically guesses which is the most interesting. And then he picks one. Now I'm going to say this. He picked of the episodes, I was like, you could have picked a more interesting letter.
I didn't realize that's what he was doing. I thought he was just like psychically reading the letters. I didn't realize they were case based.
So maybe you're right. My assumption was they were case based, but maybe you're right. He went through them. He was like, Bill, final notice. There's a case.
That's kind of what I thought was happening. But you're right. One of the letters does give him a psychic vision of some lady dressed in like old timey gear, and she like comes at him with a knife. And this is my favorite part too. Like he has this vision as hovering his hand over the letter, and then his phone rings and he picks it up and he's just like, hello? And it's like, hey, Dr. Rhodes, it's your Uncle Ray here. Did you get my letter? Well, don't bother reading it. Just get on a plane and come visit me. I was just like, why'd you write the letter? Just place the phone call.
That was weird, right? And there's another thing. We were discussing this, not you and I, but us here at home. We were discussing this TV show before we started recording. There's a weird tendency in the show in this last couple episodes, which is to have Dr. Michael, excuse me, he has his PhD.
I call him Dr. Rhodes, his proper name.
Dr. Rhodes. I call him Dr. Michael. Dr. Michael has to be like familial, have this connection, this family connection to the cases. And I don't know why. What do you think it adds? Like, it doesn't seem to... Like, if there was this extra tension or there was this connection that he felt something extra for these people because they were his family, that worked some way in the plot. But it's just like, hey, he's got a family. They keep being, like, possessed by stuff. I didn't understand what the point was because it happens in both these episodes.
Does it?
Yeah, he's related. Well, there's a connection. He has a connection to Ray. It's his uncle, so he goes. And then the next episode, he's like his old friend's wife or whatever. So he has to go. It's like, why can't they just be random people? Why do they have to be connected to him in some way?
I guess so. I mean, the first two were random people.
I guess. I know. That's what I said. The last couple episodes, it seems like this weird thing that they. I don't know. It just seemed weird to me.
You just need a way into the episode, so he happens to know these people. Like.
Anyway, it's Uncle Ray. It's his good old Uncle Ray who called about the letter he just sent.
Yes. And he gets on that plane and he's headed out because Uncle Ray has a problem. There's a ghost with an old-timey dress who's trying to kill him with a knife.
Oh, and let me just mention this. We talked about in the first podcast that this was cut down to 30 minutes. And obviously like an incomprehensible 30 minutes for syndication. But man, does this show take its time. Like when we're saying like he goes over to see Uncle Ray, he gets in the plane, we see the plane take off, then we see the taxi go. And I was like, guys, just have him arrive at the door. We don't need all this shoe leather. Come on, let's get to it.
Did it really show the whole... I don't even remember.
It did. It literally had him, a plane, and then there's stock footage of a plane getting off, and then the stock footage of a taxi driving down. I'm like, why are we seeing this? Who cares? I'm so invested in his journey to go visit Uncle Ray. Who cares? Just get him there.
Well, he does arrive in Massachusetts, which I'm never going to pronounce correctly, to find his uncle bedridden and being taken care of by the neighbors. The neighbors are, of course, is Judith Eaton, played by Cloris Leachman, and her daughter Damaris. And of course, the town doctor is also there to look after him, and the town doctor, Dr. Gil Clark, also happens to be Damaris's ex. So it's all pretty closely related. And I believe this is your favorite, this favorite actor of yours,
Mike Farrell. Yeah. It's weird because I think they mentioned later on, or maybe it is even here, who all these people are, but they're all really, like you said, they're all really closely connected. It's like, it's my uncle, and then there's this neighbor who like maybe has a relationship with him, and then her daughter, and this other doctor, and I'm like, okay, this seems like he's really walked into an incestuous bed of something here.
Well, I mean, that is a little bit of, I guess, the plot of the episode is Uncle Ray has recently moved back to Massachusetts for the reason being he retired. And he's excited because their family apparently has a plot of land here that they haven't been to in about 200 to 300 years, and he's hoping to come back and redevelop the property in his retirement. But since he's been here, his health has been deteriorating as he's been haunted by a ghost.
Yeah, this pilgrim ghost. Did we say they're dressed like a pilgrim?
I guess that's... I said old-timey, but pilgrim is maybe more evocative.
Yeah. And you get a lot of like... There's a scene that's going to come up very soon. So it's like you meet all the characters. But Dr. Michael, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about him because he's a little bit one-note, one-dimensional. And maybe you get more of him than I do. But like at one point he walks in... Damaris, her name is, right? And she's like your pretty young, young blonde thing. And she's like going through his case. And like Like he shows up and she's like, oh, I'm going through your stuff. I'm playing with your tape recorder. Can I help you unpack and stuff? And he's like, no. And they kind of have like a little bit of a meet cute. But I was like, am I supposed to get that they have a connection here?
No, I think in the 70s it wasn't unusual for someone to unpack your suitcase for you because you were a man.
Okay, I didn't realize.
That's what I got from that. They're like, well, he's arrived. He's a guest. You got to unpack his suitcase for him. I was like, okay, I guess so.
Okay, yeah, it was just weird. But anyway, she wants to play with his tape recorder. They like meet each other. And then we also, as you mentioned, this Dr. Gil Clark, he sort of shows up and he's like, you need to take aspirin. And then Uncle Ray's like, I won't take aspirin. I've seen ghosts. He's like, you haven't seen ghosts. You have a migraine or something like that. And they're very angry about it, that he won't take his pills.
But yeah, that's sort of the setup. You meet these characters, you meet the place they are, and kind of learn the problem. Very quickly, though, Rhodes sees Damaris kind of going into the woods behind Uncle Ray's house, and he follows her out there, and she leads him to his family's land. And once they're kind of on this land that the family owns, she starts acting a little bit weird. She goes in to try to give him a kiss, and then she collapses, and as she's laying there, Dr. Rhodes sees the ghost of the Pilgrim woman leap out of her body at him.
Yeah. So it's it's not as much of a meet cute as one would hope.
I mean, and they also laid out pretty clearly. It's like there's a ghost in this girl's body.
But don't you think like that's maybe one of the issues with this show is that everything's so transparent right from the beginning? Like I don't know if that's just indicative of a time period of TV, but like it feels like it takes a long time to get to the end result, which you kind of know from the beginning of this episode. Like, am I wrong about that?
I guess so. I mean, I do feel I just write it off as like the time period, so I don't really worry about it as much. But you're not wrong. I mean, you're not left with a lot of mystery on this show for sure. You kind of know who's doing what and why pretty quickly.
I guess what it is I think there's an interesting concept of this paranormal investigator for, well, I know he's a professor, but for all intents and purposes, he's a paranormal investigator. But there is a little bit, but there isn't as much as I would like of him sort of seeing a vision and then piecing something together, which leads him to another vision, which he pieces together, which leads him to something else. It's a lot of like, he sees something, then he's like, that's interesting. And then he sees something else. He's like, that's interesting. And then like it reveals a little bit more every time. And it's like, so he could have just been sitting in a chair waiting for this vision to get a little bit longer. I guess there isn't as much investigative, like he's not as active protagonist as I think would make the show a little bit more interesting. Like it's like he's just waiting for things to come to him all the time. Is that a fair critique?
Yeah, he went to the Swamp Thing School of Investigations.
You're absolutely right. It's the exact same thing where it's just like, be active. Why does he have to be so passive all the time? He took a plane, which we saw, and a taxi, which we saw. Why is he just waiting for stuff? Like, go investigate. Open a book.
Well, he very quickly sees this ghost fly out, and that ghost flies all the way back to Uncle Ray's house where he's in the bathroom taking his pills when the ghost rushes in and pushes him through a glass shower door, killing him.
I know. How did that kill him?
I assume all the broken glass like went through his body, impaling him terribly.
And I feel like Dr. Michael isn't upset enough. Don't you? He's just like, Uncle's dead.
Not a close uncle.
It's a human being.
I don't know. Uncle Ray, he was old. What are you going to do?
I don't know. I just think I'm like, Dr. Michael, shed a tear.
You wanted a scene where he was rending his clothes and weeping openly. Yes.
He's just pulling his. He's like, why? It should have been me.
Anyway, we cut to the next day, and Damaris has confessed to the murder of Uncle Ray. And apparently Dr. Gills was there when Uncle Ray was dying and held him in his arms. And Uncle Ray identified Damaris as his killer. So it's an open and shut case. Damaris is going to jail for the murder of Uncle Ray. But Dr. Rhodes is just like, wait, but I saw a ghost fly out of her. I know that she's being psychically framed for this murder. I must stop this injustice.
Yeah. He's like, I was with her, so she clearly didn't do it. But again, and maybe this isn't fair, but don't you think it would have been more interesting if the viewer was left unsure as to whether she did it or not? But we as a viewer know she didn't because we saw the scene of her with Michael in the field talking while Uncle Ray was being killed. So we know she didn't do it. So it's like, you're just waiting to get to that end result, which I already know 5 minutes into it.
Yeah, I think we've had this conversation before. I read a book. I'm going to forget the title of it at some point. Like, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but it talked about kind of how TV evolved and like kind of early cop shows. You had to show the audience what the crime was and who did it at the start for them to follow the investigation afterward. Like that was just it was just necessary. It was like a necessary way to write it so that it made sense to the audience. And then as the audience got used to that formula, it was easier to like start dropping away like the who did it or like and like leave it a mystery because they understood the context.
Okay, that's fair.
And when I watch these kind of shows, that's how I always feel about them. I just feel like contextually it wasn't part of the vocabulary yet of TV. Whether that's true, and I'm sure someone listening will be like, well, I can point out like some shows that like did it differently. But my understanding was like in this era, they kind of laid everything out at the front, and then you just got to watch the fun of the investigator solving it, even though you knew the answer already.
Okay. I mean, that's a very valid explanation as to this. But I find it as a modern viewer a little bit frustrating because what it feels like is here's everything you need to know. Aren't you excited to go on this journey? And I'm like, not really, because I already know what the end is. It's like, here's the last page of a book. Anyways, let's read the next 300 pages. Like, no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a little bit of sign of the times. It's not to say that The Sixth Sense is like the best written show. And I think some episodes have done it better than other episodes, but I do think that is the case where it's a little bit of that like they let you know up front, and then you're just kind of watching the story unfold. And like for better or worse, that was a little bit of the trend of the era.
Right. But it's he at least goes to talk to old Cloris Leachman, who like I like how adamant she is that her daughter's a witch. She's just like, yeah, she's a witch, so like we need to take care of this.
Yeah, I mean, she knows every generation of women in her family has been a witch. It's just it's just a problem the family has. They have a thing they do where they're gonna bleed the witch out of her. Like they're like, it's fine, it's normal. She's a witch. Like we knew it was gonna. I mean, even Damaris herself just like, yeah, I mean, since your uncle got here, I've been having visions of killing him, so I knew I was eventually gonna kill him. So like, what are you gonna do? I'm a witch.
Well, I like that they also have like a family knife. It's not only that like this happens constantly, like it's got to the point where they actually have like a family weapon that they use generationally to sort things out.
Yeah, no, it's a ritual now. This has been going on for 200 to 300 years.
Yeah.
But Rhodes, as you said, he does his typical classic thing is he just goes back to his family's land and kind of wanders around hoping for a psychic vision that'll give him some sort of like direction. And of course, he eventually finds one in which he sees some relatives of his from 300 years ago burning a woman to death as a witch. And she's, of course, an innocent woman who's as she's dying, she's vowing revenge. And I guess basically what we're looking at here is got a good old-fashioned grudge going on. She's left a curse through the generations against his family.
Yeah. And there's a couple things I like. One is that Dr. Michael's a real sharp dresser. So even if he's like wandering through the woods, he's still wearing like a full suit. He's just like, I'm sharp. There's no way around it, you know? But it is funny watching a TV show, and I don't know if there's a better way around it. And the show does a fine job, but like there's a lot of shots of him having to like receive like psychic information or images or whatever it might be. And so it's a lot of like the actor just like looking and pondering. And it's not terribly evocative or cinematic of anything. It's just like, I don't know, it's a weird thing. And they lean into it quite a bit. And I think it's the new idea of this paranormal investigator. And like, isn't this fascinating? But it is interesting to see like a lot of like him being like, I'm like, okay, we get it. He's getting an image.
It's that thing. It's a battle of the mind. It's just like, well, there's not much to see there unless you have lasers shooting out of that head. So it can be a bit of a non-image.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not even so much a criticism. It's just a funny thing to see because I don't know what you would do otherwise, like you're saying, other than having lasers or some sort of special effect. But otherwise, it's just like a close up of him like looking like concerned.
Yeah. But at least now Rhodes has figured out, okay, I see what's happening here. There's a grudge. I got it. So he goes to visit Damaris's lawyer, who's just like, well, it's an open shut case. She's doomed. There's nothing I can do about it. But he's just like, listen, lawyer, let me put Damaris on the stand and hypnotize her in front of the judge, and I'll get her off. And the lawyer's like, well, let's give it a try. And then they can put her up there, and the judge is like, it's unorthodox, but I'll allow it.
I love it. It's like just like you're saying. It's the classic sense of like, I guess I'll allow it. I've never seen anything crazy like this, but you know what? This time, let's let it happen. But yeah, it's I should say it's a preliminary hearing though. It's to see if they should go to court, which I did like.
Fair enough. I do like that the lawyer's just like, I found a precedent for this. I'm like, did you find a precedent for this? I doubt it, but okie dokie.
Yeah, you know what? This is actually probably, I think, at least for me, my favorite part of the episode was the court. And I kind of wish maybe more of the episode was like this. I like the idea of him trying to convince the court not only of this person's innocence, but having to do it by convincing them that of how outlandish this is, of this psychic thought that's connecting through her, and even of all this ESP and everything as a whole, having to convince a jury, I think is really interesting. And I know that's not what this episode is, but I think there could have been something there of like a whole episode of learning maybe more Michael and learning more about his trade and about this world that he lives in, and the convincing arguments he can make. And there's a little bit of hint of it the last act.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I do think watching it, you're like, oh, a courtroom episode of this would be great, where he has to not only prove innocence but also prove ESP is like would be a fun episode. And you get a little taste of it, but you're right. It's just a section of this episode. But he does put Damaris on the stand. He hypnotizes her. He sends her back 300 years so that Damaris also witnesses the origin of the grudge where this woman was burnt alive. And when she comes out of it, she's just like in shock. She like kind of understands why this is all happening to her now.
I love though in the classic this show though, it's like he's got to put her back to like, I think it's 1692, but instead of just being like you're back at 1692, he's like you're back 10 years, now you're back 20 years, now you're back 50 years, now you're back 75 years. I'm like, all right, Dr. Michael, let's get to it. It just the show is so plotting, it just takes forever to get to anything. But yes, the whole part is that he like shows her this image and not only convinces her, but she becomes such a compelling witness that sort of the court is stunned, that she's like, wait a minute, I didn't kill the person. Everyone's like, that's all we need to hear.
It is very funny. She basically just recants. They watch her sit there blankly for a second, and then she recants her confession. And then when the prosecutor objects, she's just like, I object to whatever's happening on the stand right now. Dr. Gill stands up in the courtroom and says, I also recant my testimony that Uncle Ray said Damaris killed her. And the judge is just like, well, I'm dismissing the case for lack of evidence. Case closed. And I was just like, wild stuff happening in this courtroom. That prosecutor must be furious.
Yeah. And but what I like is though, they get through that, which again, I think could have been maybe an interesting episode in itself, but it's going to get to the craziest part of the episode, which is all this. We now know what has basically happened. It wasn't her. She was sort of a conduit for this image of this person who wants revenge and blah, blah, blah. But then you're like, oh, I guess that's the episode. We've solved the case. You're like, nope. The mother still wants to knife burn it out of her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, the witch is still technically inside of her. So Cloris Leachman takes Damaris off to, she's like, I'm going to go perform that old family tradition of ritually bleeding my daughter to get the witch out. And it's great. We see her like in the woods tied to a pentagram as she's like doing these weird like witchy stuff.
That's what I was going to say. If your family tradition involves a pentagram, it's probably not a good family tradition.
What are you going to do? How are you also going to get that witch out?
I don't know. It seems not good.
And of course, Rhodes is there. He's celebrating with the lawyer their success. And he looks around and he's like, hey, what happened to our clients? And the lawyer's like, I don't know. They left. I'm not paying attention. Let's have a cigar.
Yeah. But don't worry. Michael's going to get in his car and he's going to race over. We're going to watch that for about 45 minutes.
I mean, the ghost does attack his car with a knife, so it's pretty good.
Well, let me ask you. So the ceremony is old Cloris has Damaris. She's tied down. She's in the middle of the pentagram. What is in the jar? It's spiders? Is that what's in the jar?
Spider, some of her hair. It's just like a real witch's mix of stuff.
Right. So it is. I didn't quite understand what the ritual is, and I think maybe they didn't either, because you have her tied down, then she has the knife. What did the jar have to do with anything? Because I know it's going to like break later, but like, was that holding the essence of the witch?
I think what it was, and I'm obviously reading into this, is like the jar like heats up as the witch gets like closer to the surface of Damaris. So when it bursts, I think that's like supposed to give her the signal that's the best time to bleed her daughter to get the witch out. That's what I think is happening.
Okay. And I should say, but also you mentioned that, yes, as Michael's racing towards just stop this ceremony, the ghost attacks his car. But the ghost made a real error in its judgment, because where it ran his car off the road was right by where the ceremony was happening.
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
it like way before.
I think that witch ghost just has a proximity problem, so it should have just it should have let him go by. Maybe he would have missed it. But
Yeah, exactly.
rolls his car off the road. He is loosely trapped under the passenger's or the driver's side door. It's really funny. Like, you see, it's supposed to have him pinned under the wreck of the car, but it's like, in practicality, you're like, well, you could probably wiggle out of that if you try a little harder there, Dr. Rhodes, but that's okay. We need some tension.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna save the day by, I think, showing up.
Well, that's just it. He's there. He's basically he wants to stop the ritual from happening. We don't quite know why yet, but it'll become clear in a second. But he's trapped under the car. It's on fire. Gas is leaking out of it. He's like, there's no time. I have to stop the ritual. So he does what I think my favorite thing ever is. He psychically reaches out to Damaris,
Yes.
who's tied down. And then, while psychically reaching out to her, he psychically hypnotizes her.
Was that what he was doing? I wasn't sure. It was just a lot of shots of him looking constipated. And I was like, what is he doing? He's talking to her?
No, because he repeats what he did in the courtroom, but now he's doing it psychically, where he's just like, you're sleepy, you're very, very sleepy. And what he was really doing, which I think is not a terrible idea, it's an interesting idea, is he is getting rid of this curse that's affected her family, this grudge that keeps making every subsequent woman in the family have this bleed happen. Is he basically gets her to forget the grudge from 300 years ago. He basically wipes the grudge out, hence removing the need to do a ritual every time the family has a new daughter in the family, essentially.
Right. So, yeah. So she sort of wakes up and she's like, I'm fine. Everything's good. And you're like, great, Michael saved the day. And she's like, how did you do that? He's like, oh, I sent you psychic information. She's like, interesting.
Well, you didn't talk about the part where he pulls his leg up from under the car and it runs away as it explodes. He leaps in the air as it explodes behind him.
That's right. It does do that. You're right. I should have mentioned the action sequence.
He's a real action hero.
He's not.
But yes, he solves the grudge. He saves the family from it, and it all ends with Damaris giving Dr. Rhodes a lift to the airport to show what a good job he did.
Yeah, that's the episode. You're like, huh.
I guess he still owns that land there, huh?
Yeah, they never really mention it. I guess it's not really that important, but now that Uncle Ray's dead, who does it go to?
I mean, I guess he's next in line, so when he retires, he'll come develop it.
No, he said he wasn't a very close nephew, so maybe it went to someone else. It went to a better nephew.
It went to a better nephew, maybe. I mean, we don't know the large, sprawling Rhodes family. I mean, this was his mother's side, too, so who knows how many people are on that side.
Well, but you are going to meet that apparently Dr. Michael's got lots of friends, because you're going to meet some friends of his in this next episode, which, by the way, I've mentioned, I love the titles of these episodes.
Yeah.
Great. And this one sounds like a great Pink Floyd album.
Well, here's the IMDb summary for Season 1, Episode 10, Echo of a Distant Scream.
Look, Dr. Rhodes, my mother fooled around with those things. Mind reading, fortune telling, foreseeing the future, messing around with things folks are not supposed to. Well, one day she foresaw something, all right, her own death. Then she went out and got herself killed in an accident. It's best to leave those things alone, not stir them up. I don't want anything to happen to that girl. She's like my own kin.
I understand. But if she's got a problem, I'm going to help her solve it.
Paula Norris, while riding late at night, sees a ghostly white horse. Neighbor Tuttle calls in Dr. Rhodes to investigate, and ranch hand Billy watches warily. The visions continue, including a ring of fire, and seem to be tied to a missing girl. And that was courtesy of our Hanlon 58.
Well, I guess that was Robert Hanlon who was doing that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the whole episode. I do like the part where it says Billy just stands off and stares, because that's what the poor actor does for most of this episode. Is just leers at things.
He's very wary about things.
Yeah, that's right. But we started the episode. A man and a woman are riding horses. By the way, this episode is so dark. It's crazy. It's crazy how much takes place at night. You can't see anything. But they're at night. They go up to this ridge. And let me tell you, I hate this ridge so much, because they go up to the ridge about 45 times in this episode and just keep going back. And why don't we go back to the ridge? Maybe we'll get more visions. I'm like, ugh, anything else other than go to the ridge. But this man and the woman Paula, and is this Glenn? Is that who's with her?
Yes. It's Paula, the woman. She's recently been widowed, and she's moved back to her family ranch. And this is the man with her is Glenn Tuttle, her neighbor, who's also she's been hooking up with.
Yeah, because she says later he's real handsome. It's questionable, but anyways, they're riding. They stop because she feels like someone's calling to her, but like not quite. Like she's feeling an energy of that. She goes to like kind of investigate a little bit, and she sees sort of like a spirit horse, like the image of a horse that essentially attacks her. Like it like rises up on its hooves and sort of like goes to kick her, and it knocks her off her horse. And that's the cold open. Like, what just happened? It's a horse. Crazy.
Ghost horse.
Ghost horse. Not as good title, because Echo of a Distant Scream is an excellent title.
But yes, the next day she calls up her dead husband's friend, Dr. Rhodes, to come help. And Rhodes comes out to the ranch. He's always happy to help with some ESP problems. He goes through the usual motions. Like there's a great scene where he wanders through a barn aimlessly grabbing objects, hoping one of them gives him a vision. And it's very funny. It's just like, touch this, nope. Touch this, nope.
I love
touch this, nope.
It's great you mentioned that, because it's in a few minutes in the episode. It's hilarious the amount of time they spend on it, and he doesn't get anything of it. He walks and he touches the rope. He's like, a close up of his face, like, nothing. Okay, touch this saddle, close up of his face. Nothing. What about over here? What about these boots? Nothing. I'm like, guys, why are you putting this in TV? But like, I understand why they're doing it, because they're sort of like, it doesn't work all the time. You can't connect all the time. You can't get the information you want all the time. But to watch it as a TV show, it's very funny to see a scene added in where literally nothing happens. It's a character showing up and being like, anyways, nothing happened in that scene.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think one of the issues, obviously, is that the procedural element of his investigations are that he's just waiting for something to come to him. So it is very funny to watch it in process. I'm just like, what about this? Nope. Oh, what about this? Nope.
That's the thing. And I know it's like partially an unfair criticism, because it is what the show is. But what I would love, and maybe again it's unfair, is that because this information is coming to him so infrequently or so unreliably, it'd be great if he extrapolates from it every time. Like, he touches something, he gets a little bit, then he figures out what that means, which leads him to something else, which leads him, even if it was like a series of bungles, like it leads him to the top of a hill, which he accidentally then falls down coincidentally, and then ends up into a place where he sees another bit of information. That at least would give me some sort of sense of momentum, which I feel like the show is lacking, because as you said, it's a lot of him like waiting for information. Again, that's what the show is. It just, a lot of times, like if I was like a studio, I'd be like, so like, that's what he does? He just waits for stuff? No, I'm not buying that show.
Well, you kind of described what mostly happens in this episode, is he just stumbles into things, but this is what's happening here. Is we see him come, he gets to meet a host of possible suspects. There's Glenn, the new boyfriend who lives next door. There's Hanson, the old guy who's run Paula's ranch for her family for years. Mm-hmm. There's Billy, the suspicious new farmhand. And, they're all, of course, all of them are like, we don't believe in psychic phenomena. They're all very standoffish, because they're like, they're hard country boys who don't believe in this silly willy nonsense.
I think this is the most standoffish we've had of anyone, outside of maybe Shatner, because he was thinking his wife was cheating on him. But this is like every character is against Dr. Michael, which is an interesting idea that I don't know if it's fully played out to the dramatic element it could be of him having to try to do an investigation with these tensions there. It's sort of like, yeah, they don't want him there. Like, does it matter? Not really.
Yeah, they're a little unfriendly.
Yeah, it's like, okay. To no effect.
But Rhodes, of course, eventually finds a horseshoe that gives him a vision, and what he sees is there's a girl in trouble and an angry white horse and a ring of fire, and he basically is getting a concept that there's some sort of tragedy that happened here, and then he, of course, then ends up getting in a fist fight with the next door neighbor, though I'm not sure. I know that Glenn, the next door neighbor, was going to try to hit Dr. Rhodes, but it really looks like Dr. Rhodes sucker punches him.
I agree. What it is the Glenn, the neighbor, shows up and basically is like, I want you to leave. You're making her, what's her name? Nora? Whatever her name is? Paula. Making Paula upset. No one really wants you here. You're not really doing much. Can you leave? And it looks like he goes to sort of like grab him to maybe usher him out of the room. Sort of like, not that he should do this, but yes, Dr. Michael, who we've never seen do anything before, just clobbers the guy and just knocks him out. And then it's also shot in the weirdest way, where he knocks him out and then he sees visions of like I guess like the guy's face is scarred and stuff, and you're like, oh, I guess he's the bad guy.
Yeah, I do kind of like this. Is he when Rhodes punches him, he punches him in the face, and there's a scar in his face, and that scar has a psychic vision attached to it, so we get a little vision. And it is funny, like it's true. We, the audience, are just like, well, this seems pretty suspicious, but Rhodes himself is just like, well, I don't know, who knows what that means.
he's like, I've seen a lot of visions. I've learned not to question them too much.
Yeah, because the scar basically brings the missing girl and the horse vision to him, and Rhodes goes around. He's asking all the locals at this farm, this ranch, if they know anything about a missing girl, and everyone's just like, nope, never heard of a missing girl. So Rhodes goes up to that ridge and finds an old horse skull up there, and of course that summons the ghost horse. That's the ghost horse's skull, which the ghost horse leads him down to a suspiciously cemented in tree. Which, you would think is just like, well, this is very weird, this tree in the middle of nowhere with cement in it. But Paulo's just like, I'm too sad now to continue investigating. So Rhodes is like, okay, let's just go home.
Yeah, it was weird because even Dr. Michael isn't like, he's like, let's take a look at this thing. Like, let's chip away at it. This seems sketchy. He's just like, yeah, I guess we should leave because we need to come back to the same area 45 times. So we'll deal with this later.
And back at the ranch, someone tries to push a bale of hay onto Rhodes, so we know he's getting close. And I think at some point, like that night, he's got the horse head. No one's willing to tell him anything, but he catches old Billy the farmhand sneaking into the house trying to get that horse skull away. But even when he does, Billy won't tell him anything.
Let me ask you, and this is a real, as you would call me, a real city slicker question. But if you had a bale of hay dropped on you, would that do much damage? How heavy are these bales of hay?
I'm not sure. I assume probably heavy enough they'd like give you a concussion. Maybe if they hit your neck right, you're going to snap it.
Okay, because he sort of acted like it was going to kill him. And the one that I saw fall down, I was like, I don't know. But I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these things are much heavier than it seems.
They certainly didn't give it any weight when it fell, so it didn't feel very threatening.
Yeah, but it's okay because Billy still gets to look at him and be like, I didn't do it.
Yeah. But the whole thing leads up to the middle of the night. Paula gets up and she's like she was compelled up to the ridge earlier. She's now compelled out to the barn, and we see more like visions of the ghost horse and rings of fire, and that's all happening out there. And Rhodes is like, something's definitely going on here. We keep seeing the same visions over and over and over again. And what I like too, he's walking by and he happens to notice that Glenn's Jeep is parked outside, but Glenn's not around. So he pulls the old farmhand Hanson aside, and Hanson's like, oh, yeah, Glenn just comes by and hangs out in my bedroom sometimes. And I'm like, what? Pardon me?
Is that what he said?
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, Glenn just drops by and hangs out in my bedroom. We chat sometimes. It's just like, what? Okay. In the middle of the night? I guess so. Sure. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but...
It's lonely out in the ranch.
Anyway, this night just keeps going on. Paula, goes back to sleep to only have dreams about getting buried. She says under mud, but it looks like boulders are following on top of her. It's a weird sequence where she's screaming and things are falling on her.
Okay, so we do see this image, and what we're going to find out later, as it said from the synopsis, there's a girl that's missing, and obviously she's in the tree. That's why there's concrete there. Does that jive with the image we're getting here of this, because I was like, oh, she's buried then in a ground. This was her buried alive, but that's not what happened. Unless I guess you're buried alive in the tree, but that's not the image that we see. We see essentially soil or rocks being thrown on someone.
I went back and pulled that clip for our social media, so I got to rewatch it. Because the first time you see it, I also was just boulders are falling on her, so she's trapped in a cave or something. That's kind of what I thought. Rewatching it, it's just badly shot. It is actually cement falling on her from a very low angle. And you can kind of make out that she's in a tree, but just the way it's shot is not well executed, so it doesn't make sense what you're seeing, so it doesn't jive with what she says was happening. But I think the intention was it was supposed to look like cement falling on her. It just doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah. Also, cement on a tree, has anyone ever been hidden in a tree? Is that a good place to hide a dead body? In a hollow tree and then cover it with cement?
I mean, here's the thing, is you do, on some trees, use cement to shore them up. That is not uncommon on certain kinds of trees. I mean, it's a little weird. This one's in the middle of nowhere in this ranch, so it's a little odd that has happened here. So I just think that, someone knew something about a certain kind of tree and like how you would shore it up, but like none of that's explained. So it's never, it like seems to the layman audience, it's just like, that's really weird. Like it all just seems like, huh, what? And it felt like,
well, that's me.
There were
I don't know
information
anything
missing.
about. I don't know anything about shoring up trees or anything like that. So I was like, if I just found a tree in the middle of the forest that had concrete over one side, I'd be like, well, there's something buried in here. Like that'd be my first assumption, and that's why it was odd to me that they all sort of treated it so nonchalantly. It's just like, oh, that's nothing. But maybe you're right. Maybe that's the thing. It's like, well, that's a common thing. So that's why would they respond to it weirdly?
I mean, I know ginkgo trees often, because they get quite old, and I think people will cement up will put cement in the trunk of it because the trunks hollow out to keep them like standing, so they can like stay, like they can keep like functionally like structurally sound. I don't know all the reasons for it, but like I've seen it before. So I just, yeah, and like I think that's the thing, is like they needed someone to explain why a tree would have cement in it, and then maybe have a few more trees with cement in it just so it like make it look normal.
Yeah, just have a line of dialogue where the guy's like, he's like, where are you going with that bucket of cement? He's like, I'm going to shore up some trees. I'm like, that's what they do.
Yeah, but honestly, you're right, because none of that said. It's just like us. It's like the sword, its thumb sticking. It's like the tree. Go look at the tree. It's got a problem. But after this vision of being covered in cement, Dr. Rhodes goes outside. He sees that Glenn's Jeep is still there. He's still up in that bedroom having a conversation, apparently. But it's also filled with buckets of cement. So he's just like, I guess I should go back and finally look at that tree. And so he heads back to the old cement tree. And when he gets there, that new farmhand Billy's there. He accosts Rhodes. And Billy explains that he used to work at a rodeo with a girl who went missing. And Billy and this girl were pretty tight. He taught her and her horse how to do this ring of fire trick, explaining why there's a ring of fire in the visions. And Billy's just like, I know you were involved because you found that skull head out here. And that skull head had the same fillings in its teeth from when I did horse dentistry on that horse at the rodeo. And I was just like, horse dentistry? There's fillings in the horse's teeth? That's how you... How long ago did this crime happen?
Well, there's a couple of things. Like, yes, it was apparently so long ago that all the skin and all the
it's an aged horse skull now.
Exactly. So just the skeleton has remained. It's been there that long, but they needed a way for him to be able to recognize this from just any ordinary skull that you may have come across, if that's something you come across. So they're like, oh well, he did work on his teeth. It's this point where the episode, they have to explain everyone's motivations and why they've acted the way they have, but it just doesn't work with what we've seen before. So they're like, oh, Billy was suspicious because he thought maybe Michael abducted this girl that he was having a relationship with. I'm like, what? But Michael just showed up, and he showed up the day he showed up. How would he have been involved? And then he's shown up and he's looking for stuff, and you think that he's covering his tracks from apparently 1,000 years ago when he the skeleton was left. Like it doesn't make any sense. And then we're gonna find out the motivation for old Glenn later. You're like, what? Like it feels like they got to this end and they're like, oh, I don't know, stuff happens.
Well, yeah. So Billy suspects Rhodes. He's holding him at knife point, and he tells Rhodes he's he's gonna get the truth from him using his gods. I was like, pardon me? Billy has his own set of gods?
Well, there's what it is it's a little bit, it's like, we don't need to get into all the details, but like he's indigenous of some type. Yes. And so now is the actor? I don't know.
Did they say that at any point? Like they just said he worked at a rodeo.
No, that's the implication. And so because the way he talks about it, he's like, and my elders, they told me this thing and I didn't, and I left by my people and I came here to the ranch and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and I didn't care about it. But now it's like, it's clear they were right. And I was like, hey, like, I'm not disagreeing with you, but like, well, how is it clear they're right? It had nothing to do with anything. It was just this thing to be like, oh, he's also an indigenous person.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere, and he A, wasn't, and B, at no point did they even imply he was. Like, he just worked at a rodeo, and I'm just like, so yeah, the whole thing was just like, do rodeo people have their own special rodeo gods? I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter, because immediately after he tells this to Rhodes, Glenn pulls up in his Jeep and shoots Billy.
And he shoots, again, this whole last act, he comes, he shoots Billy, and he basically, at the one point, he says, because Michael's like, well, you just shot him. You clearly are the guilty person here. He's like, no. People are gonna think you showed up and Billy tried attacking you for getting rid of this girl Nadine, who he thinks is missing. You guys get in a fight. You shoot him, and then he stabbed you, and so you killed each other. So thus, I'm fine to marry Paula and take over the ranch.
Yeah, I mean, he does lay out a plan, which is a little too complicated in that, like, I'm going to now pick up Billy's knife, stab you to death, and then I'm going to say I showed up just as he was doing that and killed him trying to save you. Like, he's like, this is how I'm going to cover it up. It's so insane that I'm just like, you should have just let Billy kill Rhodes, and then problem solved.
Yeah. Anyways. But he makes an extra mistake now because he has a gun on... he has the knife.
Do you want to talk about why he killed the girl?
Oh, because he was having a relationship with her, right?
Yes. They were having a relationship, and the girl wanted to get married. She wanted to be an honest woman. But yes, as you said, Glenn had his sights set on marrying Paula so he could take over the neighboring ranch. It's a real real ranch story going on here.
Yeah, it's just... I guess it all makes sense. It just doesn't quite work in terms of the amount of work we've taken to get here, and I know we've gone through it real quickly, but like I'm like, oh, he wanted the ranch. This was like a land deal. Okay, sure.
Yes, but as you were gonna say, Rhodes then like gives the laziest kick to kick the gun out of his hand. It's like the slowest, like biggest kick you've ever seen.
Well, and it's because Glenn is like, I need to have you have the knife, blah blah blah, and then Michael like knocks the knife out of his hand. Instead of just like killing Michael and then looking for the knife, he's like, let me look for the knife right now, and that allows Michael to give him this like haphazard kick. And
we spend the next 10 minutes watching Glenn drive his Jeep back and forth as he tries to run over Rhodes. They just like drive back and forth like 3 times, and Rhodes is always just like running in the headlights of his car like, oh, don't hit me.
Yeah, and then at one point even like he gets up on the side of a cliff face and jumps. It's like, oh, is that the end fight? Like, no, he just falls off and they continue.
But eventually the ghost girl emerges from the cemented-in tree, scares Glenn, causing him to crash his car into the tree, and her skeleton, which is also rotted to bones, flops out. And Rhodes is just like, well, I solved the case.
Yeah, he's like, I did very little. Case closed.
Case closed. And we cut to the next day. They announced to the viewer, in case they were worrying, that the boy Billy didn't die from his gunshot wound and he's doing just fine. I'm like, didn't care, but okie dokie.
Yeah. And then Anson's like, you should come back to the ranch next summer. And he's like, maybe I will. Well,
what I liked is they leave, and then Paula turns around, and one of the horses looks at Paula and starts nodding its head like, good job, you solved the murder of that white horse. And I'm like, was that what this is about? The murder of that white horse and the other horses being upset about it?
I didn't catch that, but I like that.
It's like the final shot. It's like a long shot of this horse nodding its head up and down, and then Paula looking at it being like, yep,
And that's another episode.
What is up with the 70s and ranches, Jordan? Is it just that they had so many westerns going on that you had to write a ranch episode because you had the standing set? Or was there a fascination with ranches in the 70s? Was that like a thing the city people wanted to do?
I think it's the same fascination the 70s also had with race car drivers.
Yeah, it seems like a real consistent thing where it's just like, if you're going to do a TV show, you got to go to a ranch. Even if there's like, there's no reason, it barely works, but you're going to a ranch at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're probably right. There's just like, I don't know, there's certain things people expect. This was not the best example of like a mystery you could have set on a ranch.
Yeah, no, I mean, this one definitely felt like, we've got a ranch, write anything.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, do you have any final notes, or should we get into final ratings?
Let's rate these.
All right, Jordan, how do you feel about Witch Burning Bright?
I think this a benefit in my ranking, at least for me, because I watched it first. And I watched these not back to back, but I watched them day after day, and so it's all fine. Like, I find about the show, like, I feel like I'm crapping on it. It's not even that bad a show. It's not particularly good either. It's like, for me, it ends up being like a forgettable show. Like, next year I'm not going to remember this show. You'll be like, remember Dr. Michael? I'll be like, absolutely not. It just feels like a procedural show where there's no procedure, like a spooky show where there's no spooks, and like a dramatic show where there's no drama. So, and it's just fine. Everything's fine. It all works well enough, I guess. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10 because I don't know. I don't hate it. It's just like, it's fine, I guess.
Yeah, I don't mind. I did like this episode. I liked the witch stuff. I liked that it wasn't just like in past episodes, it's always like a person needs to be saved or something along those lines. This one had a bit more of a ghost story to it. I like that there was a grudge from 300 years ago. The courtroom
But isn't
stuff.
that every witch story? Isn't every witch story but a grudge?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Is it?
I enjoyed it. I liked the episode, and I like the courtroom stuff. Like, I thought that was a lot of fun. I mean, I could have done with more of it. That was fun. I like the guest stars. They were fun guest stars. I loved watching Cloris Leachman do that weird ritual in the forest. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff. This episode. It's obviously not a great episode. There's problems. It's a bit of a mess. That shot where that old man gets thrown through a glass shower door. Great shot. I loved it. I'm gonna go 6.5. I think.
I'll say this. I think of the two episodes, I think this one was directed much better. I did notice, like, I think there's some limitations with what you can do as a TV director, but there was a little bit of flair in this episode, more so than in the next one.
Well, let's get into it then. Echo of a Distant Scream, Jordan.
I don't know. I'm giving this a 3 to 10. I just was like, what is this? What is this episode? There's a horse. It's not doing anything. They go to the ridge about 45 times. He just keeps seeing the same vision. And there's a tree with concrete. I don't know. Three Billies out of 10.
3 Billies out of 10. Yeah, the second episode that we watched is considerably worse. It's just, there's nothing here. I did my notes on it, and I just have a little notebook I write in, and like I did 3 pages of notes for a 50-minute episode because nothing happens in this episode. Like, it's sort of just like spins its wheels a lot, waiting to get going. It's not to say that it's like nothing happens, but it just like it takes so long, and like there's really nothing to report. It's just like people yell at Rhodes doesn't leave, Rhodes looks around. It is an episode that you can feel is like they had half an idea and they had a ranch, and you can tell. So I'm gonna go 2.
No, we're pretty close on both those.
Yeah, I think one was considerably better than the other.
I would agree.
Well, Jordan, that about wraps it up, I guess, for this episode of The Sixth Sense. But if you want more Sixth Sense, if you want us to go back and watch that Richard Donner episode, let's see what Richard Donner was up to. There's an opportunity with bonus episodes for charity. What we're doing is you can pick a episode from a series that we've watched, but we've skipped that episode, whether it's because we're doing a best of run like we're doing here with The Sixth Sense, where we're only watching the top 3 episodes of each season, so we're leaving tons of episodes behind from season 1. We're finishing season 1 right now. We're not going to watch any more season 1 episodes. Or if we do like an escape pod on an episode, as we sometimes do, where we just like, ratings fall too low, we got to get out of there, we miss a bunch at the end. So it's just an opportunity for the listener to be like, hey, I want to make a donation to charity. We've got a list of charities on our website, all picked by past guests. You pick one of those charities, do a donation, you let us know which episode you want us to watch, and we'll go back and do a bonus episode for you. All the details that explain this far more clearly are on the website. It's continuumdrag.podbean.com. Or, of course, send us an email here, continuumdrag@gmail.com. We can give you more information as well that way. But other than that, we've got social media to go to. You're going to see a ghost horse. You're going to see a ghost girl. You're going to see a ghost witch. You're going to see all kinds of ghosts.
Yeah.
You've got Rhodes picking his mail using psychic powers.
That's right. I like your idea, though, that he's just going through bills. He's like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. Ah, there's a case.
Yes. Don't know. I can't open this one. I can't pay this one this week. Yeah, you can find that on our social media. It's Twitter. It's Instagram. It's Facebook. It's @ContinuumDrags, the handle. That's how you get there. But that wraps up for this episode. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And, Jordan, I will see you next week.
See you then.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.